Yeah. Lisa, go ahead.
Namaste and greetings. I, Fiza Mahajan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav, Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on rural realities and Union Budget 2023-24. This discussion is organized by the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, The State of Villages # Rural Realities. This discussion is a part of IMPRI's third annual series of thematic deliberation and analysis of Union Budget Financial Year 2023-24 being organized from February 2nd to 7th, 2023. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning into this discussion. Our chair for today's discussion is Professor Sunil Ray, former director, Sinha Institute of Social Sciences, Social Studies, Patna, advisor IMPRI. We welcome you, sir. The panelists for today's discussion are Professor Sekhar, Professor, Institute for Economic Growth, New Delhi, Dr. Jyotsna Jha, Director, Center for Budget and Policy Studies, Bengaluru, Professor Krishna Raj, Professor, Center for Economic Studies and Policy, Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bengaluru, Dr. Samuel Thomas, Chief Operating Officer, SEESHA NGO, Chennai, and Dr. G.V. Ramanjanelu, Executive Director, Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Sukendrabad, Telangana. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. It is my honor to invite Professor Sunil Ray to start the program. Over to you, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Fiza, shall I begin now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not able to see all the panelists now here. Anyway, I am sure that all five have joined. Am I right, Fiza? All five
Yes, sir.
panelists have joined?
Yes, they are joining. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
That's great. At the outset, I really express my gratitude to IMPRI for having given me an opportunity to share the forum with some scholars like you, also the ones that you have here today, to discuss about the review, the budget, budget and the rural realities, the reflections of budget and rural realities, or rather, how rural realities have been reflected in the budget, Union Budget of 2023-24. It's a great opportunity because many of you have been working closely with the problems of rural India. May it be agriculture, maybe non-farm sector, maybe different intervention being taken place, at different level for natural resource management by civil society organizations and so on and so forth. But let me begin in my opening remarks. Let me begin very briefly some of my basic concerns about the rural realities. When I was hearing this budget, these are the basic concerns or issues, you can say, that came up in my mind. So first thing that I would like to raise over here, you may agree, you may not agree, but let me put forward my concerns before you. The first one is that, can the rural economy, because I have been hearing this budget like all of you every year, but somehow, especially after liberalization, the kind of budgets that you come across one after another, read one after another, you find there's a mechanism within which the whole thing has been revolving. So my question is that, coming back to the rural, realities, can the rural economy, which is ravaged by perpetual underdevelopment, and that manifests in different forms, could be extricated from the what's called Keynesian benevolence? Let me put it this way: doles and all that, the part of the Keynesian benevolence is a manifestation. Can it be extricated from that rural economy? This being tried, sometimes you say that this much is being allocated, that much is allocated, somebody disagrees with this allocation pattern. But the whole philosophy, the whole rationale, I think scholars like some of you in the panelists may be touching upon that issue, whether this kind of thing, whether good or bad, less or more, that is not the immediate concern. The immediate concern for us, the deeper concern is that whether this rural economy, which is ravaged by this, what is called perpetual underdevelopment or deprivation in some sense, can be really extricated from what is called by the Keynesian benevolence, like doles and so on and so forth. Now, some economists, especially the mainstream economists, do argue that, well, there is a trickle-down effect. Now, we know that the whole budget is prepared only to stabilize the macro economy. Is a macroeconomic stability, again, the budget is prepared. Rural economy may be a part of it a bit. It's a peripheral in certain sense. And again, banking upon the monstrous derivative market logic. And that really always being taken for granted as a source of solution of the problem of rural poverty, unemployment, misery, and so on and so forth. And that has been the story, especially during the last 25 years or so, more than 90 years after liberalization. Like, for example, this budget characteristically depend on capex, capital expenditure, like even last year also. And you find there's a 33% increase. And somebody argued that, well, it will have what's called trickle-down effect, and then employment creation will take place. Maybe the rural areas will be a little part of that kind of employment creation. Nobody knows in which direction goes. Nobody knows who are going to be employed, and so on and so forth. It is something like all asymptotic. And that is how it is being said that the unemployment problem also can be resolved through this process. See, in other words, what I'm trying to say that this this kind of derivative market economy that we have, because the whole budget is really centered around this, how really macroeconomic stability could gain to the market economy, and so on and so forth. Now, you may ask a question when it comes back, when you are back to the rural reality in India. The question is that from 89,400 crores of rupees of the Narega, it is reduced to 60,000 crores, which is causing a loss of what is called job for 7 crores, some institutions. So now we may ask a question, why the subsidy or fertilizer subsidy or food security subsidy? Food subsidy has gone down. Now, if this thing would not have gone down, the government would have been able to claim that 5.5, say fixed 9% fiscal deficit cannot be confined to that. In latest, some time ago, a few months ago, I had a paper, published paper, and then I argued how long this kind of don't continue, and for how many people are they able to generate effective demand for the goods and services being produced by the industrial sector? No. So it is basically a survival strategy. They have to day in, day out, work it out. And then, there is a fiscal constraint. You cannot depend on that. It means that you need, what does it mean? All this means that you have to go for what is called the fundamental structural transformation. Please tell us or maybe sharing, you may agree or not disagree, but somehow I do feel that there is nothing of that kind, this kind of intervention, giving the doles of different varieties of doles will bring about a structural transformation of the rural economy. And you may probably agree with me, without having a structural transformation of the rural economy, may it be credit market, may it be the land reforms, may it be any other things. Without that, it will be too difficult for us to achieve what we want to achieve in the rural economy. And the 70%, 80% of the population, or 70% of the population depend on what is called rural economy. There is no large chunk of people not coming out from the rural area to the rural areas. Again, 46%, 47% people still live in the rural areas. And we have seen what happens, during the day of COVID, what happened to the people, I do not repeat. In other words, you have huge food insecurity. Recently, something like a hunger watch, they said that 80% of the vulnerable people are having food insecurity. There are enormous data in various ways. All that I'm trying to say that this budget, I may argue before you that this budget does not really show any inclination towards a structural transformation, except the fact that what they talk about cooperativization of something which have been there, but we don't know how it's going to be permanent, to what extent it's going to achieve for what. So there is a huge problem in that, but still, my basic argument is structural transformation, the local economy, but use the local resources for the local development or something of that kind. Now, just here the reference that I'm giving you, we talk about growth and inequity. Now, is a primarily growth economy that we talk about. Again, in the focus of the economy, focus of the budget is growth, increase GDP growth. And that's something is a panacea for the solution of all types of problems. But the thesis in 1990, it goes up, the curve is a U-shaped curve, and then inequality goes down with the rise in income of per capita income of the people. There's a growth increase and inequality goes on. It's been proved false. Even Kajnet also, I have the documents, if you wish to know the references I can send you, and you might be knowing about it. Kajnet himself confided that he did not do an extensive study and with full proof. It's a guesswork. It's a pretty guesswork. And then what happens is tested in 1990, quite a few to be economists, and they found there is a pattern because there is no pattern. There is no pattern is a pattern. It doesn't happen like that. There are many countries where it increases, then inequality does not increase, does not rise, decline. And in some countries, it does decline, and there is no pattern as such. So why should you depend on that? The growth as a phobia. We never talk about, we talk about quantitative growth and never the quality of growth. We never talk about and all that. Again, the same story. The story that began during the liberalization period, the story is continuing with a bit of change here and there. I do not find a fundamental difference between what exactly one talks about growth and non-growth, and then market and non-market. Now, the growth, quantitative growth and qualitative growth, that is, again, is a very important consideration that we need to talk about and all that, because in the rural economy, not only about the economic aspect, but the social aspect, you need to deal in non-market economy. And that is the greatest combination between the two forces that have been working, making people to survive to the extent possible. Social capital, for example, is a very important factor that really works for the survival, that works instrumental for the survival of the poor people. Now, this is one thing which is there. The last point is that unemployment. And this unemployment problem in rural area, how much it is simmering. Not only disguised, is the unemployment is a serious problem, and the processing activity, the one which we have been always projecting, we do not see much of things taking place right in the rural areas. Now, this is the projection, this is the planning. We do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. And we could see, I had a glimpse of some report a few days ago, and I found that maximum schemes that are being projected the last budget and money being allocated for that, and maximum schemes, you find that not fully being utilized. That is one thing which is what's called administrative problem or whatever problem, the government knows about it. But the question is that here, back to square one, that unemployment. And the market economy, all of you know economics, seasoned economics to you all. the market economy can really do a good job if what is called employment is the trickle-down effect really being taken care of, is counted from the point of view of employment generation or employment creation. Look at East Asian miracle. What happened to East Asian? We are we proud 60s to 90s, we talk about East Asian miracle. So much of development has taken place. Growth did take place. Inequality went down, but mind it, it was basically structural transformation. There is a land reform that took place. And apart from that, the government took a number of measures to see that the price of agriculture or the essential goods does not rise, and wages, real wages of the workers do increase, industrial workers. So there are varieties of factors, but primarily it is the land reform that happened. So the point that I'm trying to make, whether you talk about unemployment problem to solve, whether you talk about resource utilization, whether you talk about structural transformation of rural areas, all that are to be what is called are essential consideration as an economist, I feel, or development economist, I feel, are important. And we need to learn the lesson and need to demystify the what's called the kind of logics, the reasoning being built up around the growth as a panacea for the solution, as a solution for all types of problems that we are facing with. With this very brief introduction, I am sure that the panelists, we have got enlightened scholars here. I don't want to take much of time. The one which I've talked about just to what's called all the, I see the ball for ruling and all that so on and so on. But then may I request now Professor Sekhar to enlighten us, to enlighten the panelist, and the timing being given to all of you. So accordingly, I request you to confine the time and all that. Yeah. I know that he wants to give he will speak more and more, but then I request you because there are people who are going to ask you several questions and all that. So, Professor Sekhar.
Thank you, Professor Ray. First of all, I would like to thank IMPRI and in particular Dr. Arjun for inviting me to this panel and giving me an opportunity to share my views. And I think Professor Ray has set the stage very well. In fact, the structural transformation that all we economists want to see in Indian economy, that doesn't seem to be happening anywhere. And I'll start with that. So in my view, the budget is an annual accounting exercise, but at the same time, the budget has to be a part of a much larger planning exercise, which should have all these aspects which Professor Ray has talked about and many other things. I mean, the agriculture's, the structural transformation of the economy, the intersectoral linkages between agriculture and non-agricultural sectors, how the terms of trade effects will work out, and how the capital investment and subsidies have to be taken care of. All these things have to be part of a much larger planning exercise spanning over a period of say 5 or 10 years, and then each budget should come out of that as an annual exercise. Although you may have closed down the planning commission, but the planning as a process needs to continue. With that point made, I want to see whether this budget has anything in continuum with the last budget or the budget before that. I think I'll focus on that. One. Number two, I also want to draw from the figures that the finance minister has put out in the budget documents, whether how the implementations of these various schemes has been in the last 1 year. So let me first start with what is a broad scenario across ministries. Here, because we are talking about rural economy, I'll talk about agriculture, rural development, Ministry of Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, and Consumer Affairs and Public Distribution, Ministry of Food Processing, and Cooperation. All these things to me are integrated in this whole rural economy. So I'll briefly touch upon each of them. Now first coming to Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture, you can see not only at the aggregate level, but also across various schemes of the Ministry of Agriculture, there seems to be some slippage in the last 1 year. That is basically the revised estimates are much lower than the budgeted estimate for almost all the schemes. So this shows that there is either the productivity of your investment has gone up or your spending has gone up. That means with less amount of money you are able to achieve higher outcomes, or you have not been able to actually achieve the outcomes. So you have not been able to spend that money. So I would tend to think on the second option, because in 1 year you cannot expect that the productivity has gone up so much of the bureaucracy or the service delivery system that we have revised estimates much lower than the budgeted estimates. And this has happened in Ministry of Agriculture. There are two departments in Ministry of Agriculture: Department of Agriculture and Family Farmers Welfare, and Research and Extension. The research and extension part seems to have done slightly better, because there is some increase in the revised estimates over the budgeted estimates. And the same story repeats in Consumer Affairs, Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, and also Ministry of Food Processing. All these ministries show a fall in the revised estimates as compared to the budgeted estimates. This to me is somewhat, it indicates a slack in the implementation of the programs. One. Whereas the rural development ministry seems to have done really well. Rural Development Ministry and the cooperation, the newly formed cooperation ministry under the charge of Mr. Amit Shah, I think that seems to have done reasonably better. So with this said, let me move to what are the important flagship schemes. How are they faring? Now there are, in agriculture, we know that there are important schemes like Fasal Bima Yojana, PM Asha, PM Kisan, and so on. So you see that I can see from the figures that there is a fall in the revised estimates of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, but this year's allocation are slightly above that. So Fasal Bima Yojana is not going to suffer much of an allocation problem, but implementation is the key as always. And the major worry for me is the PM Asha program. PM Asha program, if you remember, this was launched in 2018, 17-18, when for the first time the government has announced that they are going to have MSPs 50% above the cost of production. So all the MSPs have been hiked, and PM Asha was launched with a fanfare, saying that this is going to be the scheme which will actually take care of this procurement and other things. But unfortunately, the budgeted estimates, they seem to be ridiculously low. Last year it was just 1 crore for that program, and this year it has gone down to 0.01 crore, which is, to me, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I just cannot understand the math behind that. So I will leave it at that. Just I'm flagging this issue. So that important scheme seems to be having extremely ridiculously low budget allocation. Then PM Kisan is one program which is basically an income support program to the farmers, where 6,000 rupees is given annually. This seems to be doing really well. In fact, even my own field studies show that this PM Kisan has been relatively much better. And even in this scheme, the revised estimates are much lower than the budgeted estimates, and which shows that there is some slack somewhere. But at least the allocations have not, this year's allocations have not fallen. So PM Kisan is okay. And now, what about the much touted farmer producer organization, that is basically the forming 10,000 farmer producer organizations? I think here the budgetary allocations seem to be more or less the same. In fact, when I say the budgetary allocations have slightly increased or they have remained the same, what it means is that in real terms they have actually fallen, or they have remained, because The inflation has been higher this year. So in real terms, whatever I'm talking about are in nominal terms. So if in nominal terms, if they have remained stable, that means in real terms they may have gone down. So that's the important issue. Now, we have to see that agriculture is right now facing very important, very major problems. And three main objectives of agriculture policy ought to be food security, farmers' income, and natural resource degradation. So whether this budget actually addresses those concerns is something that I'm worried about. Because when I say food security, at least for rice, wheat, pulses, and oil seeds, I think India should not be depending on international markets. These are some very basic necessities for domestic consumption. And literature, there's ample literature that the international markets are not perfectly competitive or infinitely elastic. So India going into the international markets for getting its supplies is riddled with risk. So having said that, pulses and oil seeds, edible oils are the ones we import in a major way. And I see that the budgetary allocations for edible oil, that is oil palm, oil seeds, and also the pulses seem to have slightly gone down. So again, that doesn't really look very favorable for meeting the food security needs. One. Number two, as we have already seen that PM Kisan, which is the direct income transfer program, there is hardly any. In fact, many economists were expecting an increase in the PM Kisan allocation of 6,000, but that has not happened. So even the farmers' income, direct income thing also does not seem to have been taken care of in this budget. So food security thing and also the farmers' income, both these objectives don't seem to have been been promoted by at least this budget as far as my analysis goes. Now the third is the natural resource degradation. And natural resource, when I say it's the groundwater. So we have huge groundwater problem in states like Punjab and Haryana, where because of higher MSP for rice and also combined with free power and subsidies on irrigation. So what we have is a system where farmers are drawing so much of groundwater. There is so much groundwater depletion. So I was hoping actually that the budget will spell out some program for diversification, crop diversification away from rice in Punjab and Haryana. And some suitable incentives will be given to farmers there for moving away from rice and wheat in those states. But unfortunately, I don't see anything of that sort in this budget. Now let me quickly move to the allied activities, which is the livestock and fisheries. In the livestock sector, again the same story as I have told you, livestock and fisheries, that the revised estimates are lower than the budgeted estimate. But they have done the wise thing. They have not gone by the revised estimates. They have actually increased allocations for livestock health and disease control and also National Livestock Mission. In my view, the livestock health and disease control is a very, very important program, and that needs this kind of emphasis. In fact, last budget also they did have a good substantial allocation for this program, and it's a very important program for as we all know, actually a lot of the lower strata of the society are drawing their sustenance from dairying and livestock, animal husbandry. So this is a very important program, and they have done the right thing by increasing allocations for these two. Then in case of fisheries also the same thing, PM Matsya Sampada Yojana and also PM has seen increased allocation, and that's a good sign in my view. So fisheries is another important sector which is showing an enormous growth rate in the last 6-7 years, almost like 8%. Although the share of fisheries in total ag GDP is not very high, not as high as livestock and animal husbandry, but fisheries is a high growth rate.
Yes. Sekhar, sorry. It's a fantastic what is called subsector analysis in terms of budget allocations, good, bad. more or less on so and so forth, and its implications. Now, substantive argument, Professor Sekhar, we are eager to hear from an agriculture economist like you. What is substantive argument that you would put forward over the discussion on the budgetary allocation that you have, minus, plus, good, bad, whatever it is? What is substantive argument? Let us hear around that substantive argument. This kind of discussion, subsector analysis is very important. But from there, you build up. You must have built up what is called a substantive argument. What is that? We are looking forward to hear from you the substantive argument, an agriculture economics like you.
Okay, I think you are actually looking at the structural transformation, whether that kind of...
That is one thing which you have already spoken, but more than that.
The point is basically the substantive argument is that actually that cannot come in the budget. Actually, that has to happen outside the budget. It has to be more policy related. Budget is, as I've said it right at the outset, it's an annual accounting exercise. We should not expect more than that from there. So it's an annual accounting exercise. So whether that larger planning is happening or not is the moot question. And that we all know that such a plan is not happening, because agriculture is a part of the rural economy. And rural economy, and we all know that as of the situational assessment survey, in fact, only 40% of the income is coming from agriculture, farming, and the remaining is coming from other sectors like animal husbandry, dairying, fisheries, wages. Wages are contributing a substantial thing. So until and unless your rural economy actually picks up, in the sense that those activities in the rural economy pick up, nothing can happen. So, but here, what is the larger question? The larger question is, you have two huge ministries, rural development and agriculture. Agriculture is focusing only on agriculture related topics, whereas the rural development is doing something completely disjointly, in my view, because rural development has these huge programs like Manrega, which is basically a safety net program for employment generation. Number two, you have the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is a very useful program for rural livelihoods. Number three is the Gram Sadak Yojana, which is for infrastructure, basically road infrastructure. Why can't the agriculture and rural development programs be dovetailed? This I have written elsewhere in my EPW articles and also my newspaper articles, that there has to be an integrated. For example, suppose there is a dal mill that needs to be set up, which is subsidized by the Ministry of Agriculture. Why can't that be part of the National Rural Livelihood Mission under the Rural Development Program? Why can't that? Because NRLM actually focuses on organizing women and empowering them to take up economically viable activities. Why can't those economically viable activities be dovetailed with the local agriculture? And also, since one of the objectives is to increase millets consumption and also production, promote millets production. Why can't these SHGs under NRLM be encouraged to actually dovetail their activities with millets production and also making some kind of products and then distributing them in the local region, so that the local production and consumption can be combined? So these are things that have to happen outside the budget. So I'm actually not discussing those substantive issues for the simple reason that budget is a budget. After all, it's numbers. It's all numbers. So whatever story I am trying to tell is through the numbers. So that's where I am focusing. So in that sense, I am coming ministry by ministry. What are these large things, which that means either your schemes are not working or you're not allocating enough money. So either way, it's not good. So that's what I'm trying to. So I'm trying to give those numbers for that reason, not because of I'm not interested in numbers per se. Okay, that's the thing. So that said, actually, in these allied activities, what I see is all the core agricultural activities have received somewhat lesser attention in this budget.
You've got only 1 minute more.
Yeah, sure. I'll wind up. So the allied activities seem to have got a good allocation in the budget, and then coming to the rural development, actually rural development schemes, all the programs have done really well. They seem to have used up all their whatever allocations they have made last year, and their outcomes are also appear to be pretty good, whether it's NRLM, PMJSV, and other things. And so we see really somewhat encouraging signs on the rural development front. But as I have already said, these programs have to be functionally integrated, and only then you can see some of these outcomes. Otherwise, there will be duplication of efforts. So I think I'll stop here because.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm not really very positive about the outcomes for agriculture from this budget. I hope something will be there in the next year's interim budget, which can be, I think, more like a election tailored budget.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Sekhar. Very interesting conclusion that you've drawn. Anyway, we'll keep it open for discussion after all panelists speak up, about the concerns. Now, may I request Professor Krishna Raj to share his thought on this. Professor Krishna Raj.
Thank you, Professor Sunil Ray. Thank you, IMPRI, Dr. Arjun, for having given me this opportunity to reflect 2023-24 Union Budget. Yes, eminent professors already have spoken, both Ray and Professor Sekhar. Professor Ray has very clearly mentioned the budget which has aimed at macroeconomic stability. That does mean that both the production and consumption sector. This budget, I feel that yes, overemphasized and overarching importance has been given to once again the production sector rather than consumption sector. It wants to enhance the supply of resources production, and this has been reflected in capex as well as the subsidies extended to various sectors. If you look at the market economy, this market economy has created several issues and problems, especially for the India. The basic idea in economics we study is that it has created more risks and uncertainty. It has been experienced in recent times through COVID-19 and also climate change, and also various natural resource issues, the depletion of groundwater table, and also the market economy. Another issue is that inflation. So there is no commensurate increase in the real wages in the, especially in agriculture sector, but the inflation is imposing high risk apart from natural risks such as climate change and groundwater depletion. And this has been reflected in various reports. Even if you take the Human Development Index, the India has slipped down from 2019 to 2022. You can see 0.642 decline in the Human Development Index. So when there are risks and uncertainties in the rural areas, it is the job of the government to bring back the economy, rural economy, on the path of development. Even though it calls for an overall development through Sapta Rishi, 7 priority areas of development. But these Sapta Rishi areas or priorities have been not giving a clear push for increase in the employment in the rural areas, or food security, or even natural resource management. So there are, yes, we know that the budget is expected to reallocate the resources where the resources are, which are very much required to bring back the economy on the path of stability or the constant or continuous growth. So I don't know where it has targeted the growth prospects, but according to me, the low income group, where the rural India as this low income group, that has been constantly neglected in recent times, as mentioned in the earlier speaker, the Sekhar and others. The Mahatma Gandhi Narega program, the allocation has been drastically reduced to 60,000 crores. So it means that the budget is giving an idea or impression that it is focusing more on high income group or corporate sector, or what do you call it, a production sector, because it is giving more or much importance to production linked incentive schemes. So the rural sector has completely been neglected. At least we expect the finance minister or the prime minister, they have their own programs called doubling of farmers' income. So there is no mention in this budget about whether the doubling of farmers' income has been done, or what is the status, or how they want to pursue this program further, whether they have revised the target for next 25 years, because we are in the Amrit Kal. As per the government, it says that people are in Amrit Kal. Whether the rural people are in Amrit Kal, we don't know really. But still, it has given an impression that all are in Amrit Kal, the period of, so we are entering into the independence of 100 years. So even today, what I understand, the rural reality is that the poverty is high among the rural areas when compared to urban areas. This has been depicted in recent Niti Aayog report, Multidimensional Poverty Index. The unemployment even today is very high, around 9% in rural areas, as per the CMI report. And most importantly, access to basic needs like housing, education, electricity, and sanitation, water, and other resources are highly skewed, and these are all available to the urbanites, whereas in case of rural areas, these have been neglected. So even health, for example, the MMR is very high in rural areas when compared to the urban areas. Infant mortality rate is also high in case of rural areas. So as a result, there is a constant migration of people, except in COVID period, a reverse migration took place. But the migration issue has not been completely addressed by the government or through various programs. Every year the government comes out with new programs. This year also there has come out with new programs, but what actually missing is that there is a complete gap in allocation and implementation and achievement also. So at least the citizens of India, or we the people, economists concerned about the people, common man, we expect what is the performance of the government in the last 1 year, how it wants to address the very pressing issues like poverty, unemployment, and inequality in income.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
No, very nice. That I agree with you totally.
Yeah. Shall I have time, sir, or shall I have time, sir?
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So in this regard, the government should have come out with a action plan based on the review of its own policies pursued in the last, at least in this government 2014 onwards. So that makes sense, at least for the economists, to understand what is budget. So announcement of new programs and without reviewing the old programs may not help. But there may be scope for this government, at least in the Amrit Kal, whether we are seriously pursuing the developmental needs of the people that ensures at least economic and income equality in the Amrit Kal period. Further, when we look at the budget, at least one program I would like to appreciate that one, even though it is very late, but one program I really appreciate is that there is a program for artisans, that is Vishwakarma. So even today, there are several people, several artisans, they need a government support to pursue their profession, the old profession, with a new technology and find a market for their products. At least we have taken up one research study. One of my research student, PhD student, she is doing PhD on artisan industries in Kerala. So this has been affected, this artisan industry has been affected by the globalization and liberalization and also privatization. But most importantly, the alternative products are available in the market, particularly the plastic goods and other things. So in this regard, at least the government has thought over, but allocation is still low when compared to the number of artisans in India. At least it is starting with some incentive program. The another program I liked under this budget is that it wants to take care of the primitive tribals through residential schools. It is a very good idea. I really appreciate they need such support and hand-holding of the tribal children with all facilities of residential schools, because I'm also expert. I visited residential school. They are doing excellently in Karnataka in providing good education and also good food. That makes sense, at least for me. So when come to the sustainable developmental goals, the government wants to pursue the sustainable developmental goals. You know that there are 17 sustainable developmental goals, and at least I want to refer it to at least 2 or 3. One is that no poverty by 2030, no hunger, and also housing for all, and water and sanitation for all, energy for all, like this. This list goes like this. But I want to know what is the allocation of this budget for these type of programs, and how incremental improvement in the reduction in the poverty and also hunger and other services such as health, housing sector, and also sanitation and water. We want to know from the government how these issues or programs are given priority in the budget through allocation, and how they are pursued in the by 2030. So there is also this year, since I am an environmental economist, I was really criticizing the government for committing 2070, the net zero emission. At the same time, there are no policies, strong policies to pursue such policies. The only one program this government has prioritized is that green hydrogen, where it wants to pursue that. But one has to understand that this green hydrogen energy is still in research and development stage, infancy stage, what I can say. But that cannot ensure replacing all the energy needs of the Indian economy, because there are several sectors even today, they depend on various sources of fossil fuels, including coal, gas, petrol, diesel, and even electricity is produced out of coal, thermal power, etc. So it is very difficult to replace all these things. According to my own study, my understanding, the financing of climate change is very, very poor. And I don't know how this government wants to pursue, because the energy consumption, the per capita energy consumption is increasing. On the other hand, as knowledge, as one knows, as energy per capita energy consumption increases, the per capita CO2 emission or greenhouse gas emission will also increasing. It has been increasing actually. It is not going in a reverse way. So what I understand out of this budget is that there is a gap between what the government wants to commit and what it wants to achieve. Almost it is missing targets. The one target is that the doubling of farmers' income. The another one was that the smart cities program. There are several programs I can mention here, and the seriousness of the government is that it has committed several things, but there is a complete gap in achieving several things. Therefore, the rural India in this budget has been completely neglected to push for effective demand or consumption. And already the inflation has affected the millions of people. Without the support of rural employment programs, and it will enhance the poverty base, and also the climate and other issues are already affecting the people, and more people are coming under the poverty line, because in COVID period also we understood that many middle income group people are pushed to low income group people like this.
You've got 1 minute, Professor Krishna Raj.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll finish. That. So, second and most important is that even today the millions of people, they don't have food security. Already it has been mentioned in the global hunger report. So the food subsidy allocation has also been reduced, but it has ensured that at least for next 1 year, the government wants to give food, subsidized food. And that is not enough. But what is more important is that the government should have a clear idea how to make development of the rural India and how it can improve the livelihood needs of the people and also agricultural needs of the farmers, because rural development and agricultural development are closely related, as Professor Sekhar mentioned. So integrating these two sectors and bringing jobs in the rural areas, creating jobs in the rural areas can spur the economic development, which is because even today 60% of the people are in rural area, so they demand much. Their effective demand is going to help the economy to grow further. But at the same time, the government has been neglecting the sustainable development, because the market economy is always developing on the basis of crony capitalism. So the sustainable development should have been given a more thrust in this budget, but still it has been neglected. It is a very good opportunity for the government to pursue the sustainable development in India, because it has to learn from the Western countries, because the Western countries have already switched over to the green growth path. But India still wants to make economic development more, and this economic development ultimately is not translating into economic growth of everyone or income equality for everyone. It is creating income inequality in India. I stop here, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishna Raj. We had two economics presentation and very, I must say, very analytical. Perhaps if the time would have been given, they would have spoken more and more and all that, but I know the time constant. But the last, Professor Krishna, just one thing, I have a few questions to ask later on, but basically, the tragedy is that economics like or the panel, the two professors that spoken, government doesn't want to hear you. You think that government should do, government should do, government should do, government shouldn't do. Government is another bunch of economics, they say nothing doing. Our rationale is correct, our logic is correct. What the hell you are talking? Bas, bat khatam. Stop over there. That is what exactly is happening. You talk about sustainable development, it is in paper, only in paper.
Yes.
Again, by 2030 can never happen. Can never happen. Is there any study that shows that without structural renovation or structural, change of any economy, this happened? Any studies there? Can anybody show? I'm telling you, both of you live economists, well known. They're really real researchers. Tell me, nothing of that kind is there. And the government said nothing doing. I don't bother about what kind of study that you're talking about. We don't bother.
Correct.
As simple as that. So even then, as you said very rightly, we need to really place forward. We need to really argue. We need to search for the right rationale for the people at large to bring about equity, to bring about sustainable development that satisfies the two considerations. One is ecological stability on the one hand, and economic stability of the largest number of population of the country. That is the two things to be there. I totally agree with you. Let us go to the next. Thank you very much, Professor Krishna Raj. And
Thank you, sir.
may I request now, thank you so much. We have been now Dr. Jyotsna Jha. May I request Dr. Jyotsna Jha to place forward her arguments on that and her understanding about the rural realities and budget. Professor Dr. Jyotsna Jha.
Yeah, thank you,
Professor
Professor Ray. Thank you, Professor Ray, and thank you, Arjun. Thank you, IMPRI, for giving the opportunity. And it's nice to see some of the colleagues, again discussing the same issue. And I'll try to add to the discussion that has taken place so far. See, first of all,
Professor Dr. Jha, sorry to interrupt you. May I request you, I'm actually looking forward to hear more from you, something different, because you have been dealing with this budget analysis for quite some time, and you know the difference from one to another. Now, it will be very important for us to know much more from your insights about what this is, and does it have anything to do with the people's problems, especially rural areas. A very focused and substantive argument. Yes, Dr. Jha, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. So at the outset, and we are discussing budget 23. So I would say that as we all understand that it's difficult to gauge the full ramifications of budget for rural areas by just looking at the budget. And therefore a long-term perspective, and the perspective with the goals that we have all been referring to: food security, livelihood security, income security. And I would add to that is, nutrition security and access to basic services that actually prepares you for future, for example, education and health. And in the context of the major challenges that our economy has been facing, which is of extremely low savings, consumption not picking up, and private investment not picking up. I think that larger picture one has to keep in mind, and the unemployment scenario. So with that, if one looks at, then where to start? You have to start looking at the ministry's budgets. Agriculture, Professor Sekhar has talked about. And the only thing I was wanting to add was that if you look at doubling of income, it actually has in real terms between 15 and 22. If you look at figures, the agricultural income has in real terms gone down. Forget about it's not even stagnant in real terms. And if if we look at the whole thing, the fertilizer prices have gone up tremendously post-war, and the subsidies. I mean, subsidy issue is a much more complex issue, but just looking at the fact that subsidy is going to go down and the price is up, the input costs are going to be really very high for agriculture, with implications for farmers' income and agricultural income on the whole. So that's the one side of agriculture. And again, millets has been talked about, but not in the sense one would have liked to see it. Millets has implications, but what we see here as global hub, digitech, and those kinds of things, rather than integrating it with the rural economy. What are the incentives to move, as Professor Sekhar was talking about, like if you want farmers to move away from rice and wheat, or if you want to integrate it with midday meal or the nutritional supplement that we give in Anganwadis. None of that actually the budget mentions at all. So those are the agriculture bit, and that also brings me to the fact that alignment. The problem is that our entire development has never been aligned. We look at these as departmental rather than sectoral. So that is an issue. Of course, in the larger frame, everything is linked with everything, but the planning really gets hampered because we do not look at it. And so what I will talk about, I'll talk about employment. I'll also talk about social sectors, because that's something others have not touched as yet. And not only in the sense of social services, but also in the terms of what it means for lives of people living in rural areas, in terms of employment, in terms of shifts that they aspire for. So livelihood security, we all have talked about NREGA. And I think it's important to talk about NREGA, not merely because it's a livelihood security, but also because it unlike, for example, enhanced money to PM Awas Yojana, which is a welcome step, I feel, the employment emanating from PM Awas Yojana and employment emanating from NREGA can have very different faces. NREGA is also linked with decentralized planning. It's also linked with a much more dignity and control and over your own, what kind of development you want. A Gram Panchayat, the women's group, they all can play a very different kind of role. And there I feel that there is a growing tendency to, because of the governance failures, the processes, and we have documented the whole thing that how processes are a major bottlenecks. You badly implement because of the governance failures, and then you declare a program a failure, and then you come, rather than talking about governance failure, you call it the low absorption capacity. I think these are very different things conceptually, and governance failure should not be referred to as low absorption capacity. So there is a problem in that, and that is something. Why I'm saying there is a pattern. There is a pattern. You make your health services, education services, employment guarantee, everything first. You make the deliver badly, and then you discredit them, and then you say that they are not functioning, and then you close them down. And then it becomes, a path to privatization and leading to unaffordability of the poor and further enhancing the inequality. So, and rural is much more dependent on these as compared to urban, much more vulnerable to these. So, therefore, NREGA decline in allocation is a real issue. Also, gender comes in picture. Women have been very large proportion they have been using it, and especially, in fact, studies show that destitute women, widowed, abandoned by their families, older women, they all have been actually using NREGA. So who would otherwise perhaps find it difficult to get waged employment. So I think that's NREGA is not only an employment security, it has many other things linked, and therefore demise of NREGA is not only the employment related issue. Similarly, employment, it comes to, you know, they are very small. If you consider Anganwadis and local schools, formal sector employment, they are formal sector employment, and they are there in rural areas. And there's no shift in those allocations. There is not a word about those. If you take education, which again, you know, state education has far more significance in rural areas, public education, as compared to urban areas. And the demand for, you know, post-secondary education is huge, with very limited supply. The privatization in higher and higher secondary education and higher education has been much more than lower, like secondary as well as primary. There's nothing for that. As a proportion of total, actually education has declined. And whatever nominal, you know, increase we see for programs like exemplar school. Again, the 100 exemplar school is not what we need in this country. What we need is that all our schools should function better, so that everybody who's going to school benefits, and not, we don't need more of exemplar, center of excellence, center of, you know, we don't need that. You know, people who, there are centers of excellence already available, and people who can afford, who you know, have the wherewithal, social capital, they are able to access that. So that's social sector decline. PM Poshan, which was such a big thing in the last year's budget, was not even mentioned this year. And there is a problem if you look at in real terms, and if you look at the long-term perspective, this decade has been basically a decade of decline in social sector allocations and spending. And that's a problem. We did one analysis, and we saw that it's expenditure, even if, you know, these expenditures are not, I would say, like highly efficient, even at that level of efficiency, we found a complete correlation, you know, a very high correlation between high per capita public expenditure and much better indicators of education, health, and empowerment. So there is a link between public expenditure and these. And my argument has been that it's not only, so one is this, that for better, you know, long-term human resource development, but also in the short run, these do create economic benefits. When you have cash income in a cash-starved rural society, it does create demand. It does create different kind of, you know, for small unorganized sector products. So there is an economic activity generation that also happens through these. And in that context, it's kind of important to note that even the existing employment, for example, if you look at Anganwadi workers, their wages have been completely declining. They are not only stagnant. If you look at, and of course, in current situation, the cost of living, the high food inflation and all has affected everyone. But there is something about feminization of workforce in rural areas. You have ASHA workers, you have, and even in peri-urban, and you have, and their wages have been completely declining. And that also means that, you know, there's nothing that will push consumption. Agricultural income has been declining. Whatever little formal employment is there, that has been declining. Small unorganized sectors, again, there is nothing. There is something for the formal sector in this budget, but informal sector, nothing other than artisans. That's definitely a welcome step. Definitely, that's a welcome. Of course, one has to see how it's implemented, but that is definitely a good thing. Now, the whole question that arises from this, that what happens, what is the significance of those things which are not meant for rural directly, but they are there? For example, the capex, okay, the capital expenditure, the budget, which is a continuation of the government's philosophy for last few years. So it's not only this year budget, that faith in capital expenditure, bringing growth and creating employment opportunities. There's hardly any evidence to have, you know, belief in that faith. All are like, despite everything, despite lowering of corporate taxes, despite all kinds of other incentives, private investment has not picked up. So obviously, you know, private investment looks at demand. And if it doesn't see, if it doesn't foresee private consumption picking up, private demand picking up, why will it invest? Not because of some tax incentives. So so the loss of resources, loss of revenue resources has not converted itself into better investment and employment creation. So I really fail to understand, why do we have continued faith in that path if it's not leading to results?
Okay.
No, there's hardly any evidence to show that it's leading to any result. So I don't know how it will impact employment, both at urban and rural. If you look at, so the capex is there. One doesn't even know whether, what percentage of that goes to rural and how it will pan out. But there's hardly any evidence of last 2 years budget, the impact of the last 2 years budget, to have that kind of faith that it will, lead to that kind of change.
Now, Dr. Jha, sorry for interruption. Maybe that 1 minute more that you can have. But before that, what is that you think that should be done? Suppose, for example, if I request you, just put forward your point. Okay, all this being done, I'm so very, very nicely that you articulated. But in a few sentences, what priority 1, 2, 3 in the rural areas? What kind of allocative pattern? What intervention? Let's forget about allocation. Intervention. What sort of intervention in which subsector should be made in the rural areas to change the scenario?
I actually think that integrating rural non-farm and farm economy, as well as the formal sector, I feel that if you bring everything together in terms of, even in terms of governance, so I feel that, budget is as important, governance is as important as governance, as budget. And if you change that, and there I do feel like we did a multiplier study for Karnataka, and multiplier studies are difficult and much more difficult for subnational level because of the data issues. But it clearly showed that investment in public health and public expenditure has far more distributive multiplier effect. It's much higher, and it also works much better for rural areas. So I do feel that that kind of investment helps. Also in terms of non-farm economy, in terms of, for example, if artisans and handicraft, handlooms, if that is really linked with, see, for the technology, for example, the way technology has been used is largely for doing away with wrongful inclusion. It's rather than that, if the focus is on, what is, okay, we have reduced the numbers from 1,000 to 900, and that's a big achievement. In the process, you also led to wrongful exclusion. So I feel that if the focus is the accountability system changes, governance reforms happen, and you look at the European economy, that's a capitalist economy. And I think that point I keep making repeatedly. So maybe I'm repeating here as well, which is that investment in basic, education, health, livelihood security, income security, coupled with use of technology for people, and not to exclude people, but to include people, and not at the cost of, not at with the goal of centralizing everything, but improving decentralized planning, can do wonders even in rural areas.
Okay.
Yeah, and to I think that.
So, shall I request you to now just for some time to stop over here? I know that you have got many things to talk about and all that, but very insightful description and a very important observation that you have made in a very short span of time. Now, we may open up the discussion later on at a time, but now shall I request Dr. Samuel Thomas?
I didn't realize that I am finishing.
You have to conclude.
In terms of time, I thought everybody has 20 minutes. That's what people have been taking, but
still less than 20 minutes that you spoke.
Please take 2 minutes more. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
We'll have more time later on. Dr. Samuel Thomas. May I request Dr. Samuel?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Arjun, Professor Ray, and the eminent panelist. And I've been a silent listener, and though I'm not an economist, and being part of the NGO sector and from the healthcare industry, there are a lot of things which has been discussed, and we have addressed the core points: the governance, the credibility, the implementation, and various things which has been lacking for a few years. And I would like to focus on three things mainly as we work in the rural India. After seeing the budget, I feel that the rural India is forgotten. Though 60% of the people live in the. Sir, am I audible?
Which part of India? Which part of India?
Rural India, rural India.
Which
Yes.
part of rural India? Is it in
Hello.
Kerala or where?
Sir, are you able to hear me, sir?
Yeah, but I'm saying that where your NGO is located, where
We are a
exactly you're working
Pan
on?
India. We are Pan India NGO. We are working
In Tamil,
Tamil
in
Nadu.
Tamil Nadu? In Tamil
Yeah,
Nadu?
Tamil
Okay,
Nadu.
okay.
Tamil
Ah,
Nadu.
okay, yeah.
So I would like to focus on three things, mainly the employment, education, and health. And few things which we encounter right from the field is the slashing on Rega would really impact upon the public who are living in the villages. The agriculture allocation is stagnant, lacks any connectivity with the previous announcements and the implementation status of various projects. There is no proposal for structural development plan, proposal for new rural India. Inflation is very high. The paying capacity is also very low. The holistic growth in rural India, that is through agriculture, education, health, and employability, lacks vision. Every time there is a new term coined, rebranding, renaming, rebranding, all those things happen. But implementation and impact analysis has also to be reviewed before announcing new programs. With regard to the healthcare sector, there has been some marginal increase in Ayushman Bharat and the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana from 6,412 crores to 7,200 crores. There has been a marginal increase. And Rural Health Mission too, there has been a marginal increase. But there is one thing which was forgotten is the National Health Research. I do not know how they have slashed it. The research and R&D has to happen. We are just recovering from COVID, and the impact in rural India was quite high. And the budgetary allocation for research has been slashed from 3,200 crores to 2,980 crores. And again, the Ayushman Bharat again fails to include the senior citizens. The enrollment to Ayushman Bharat, they say 5 lakh is the insurance for the family. But how it has been enrolled, and rural India is yet to know. The villages nearby, the tribal population nearby, they are yet to be enrolled. They are not, the awareness, though there is some allocation for sickle cell anemia by alleviation by 2047. And there is some announcement for multidisciplinary medical devices project. That's all a welcome thing. But the core basics, where is the need? The vaccination drives, how are we going to carry out? And how are we going to be free of pulmonary infections, which is a sequelae of COVID? There is no mention of that. There is allocation, there is substantial, there is some marginal increase in the budgetary allocation, but the core, the research, and that has been avoided. And with regard to the National Education Mission, and the Professor Krishna Raj was mentioning that there has been schools, residential schools set up. But the most common thing where the rural children would require is been reduced. They want food. The food, the rebranded midday meal scheme is down by 9.37%. Will the children come to school? Definitely the numbers would go down. There is no thought on social development, children coming in. There might be drop in children coming to schools, and from 1,800 crores it has been brought down to 12,800 to 11,600. So that will definitely impact. They call it as PM Poshan. Then with regard to National Health Mission also, there is only a limited increase. And I would like to focus this millet hub. There should be some private, public and private partnerships. There is some accelerated fund allocated. There is agri credit given for some 20 trillions. They have named it as Sri Hanna. There is cooperative based development plans proposed. Everything remains a proposal. As Professor Ray was asking, what is for the future? The proposals has to be implemented. The impact has to be reviewed, whether it has gone to the public directly, whether it has reached, rather than rebranding, renaming, rebottling, all those stuffs. The policies which has been announced, is it serving the purpose? And the review, while placing the budget as eminent panelists has suggested, it is again the presentation of the financials. Financials should drastically also focus on the implementation part, the impact part of it also. And of course, the new age technology to the farmers would impact. But where is the allocation for training those people? The new age technology would be a catchy thing for a student or an agricultural person running the entrepreneur who is doing it. But whether it will reach the farmer, there is a technological development. How the farmer is going to use the technology and at what cost he is going to do that. The costing, the paying capacity, there is some new regime, the old regime of income tax, everything is being brought forth. But what the common man is going to have, what is the takeaway for a common man? Yes, millet hub is one point, but MNRG, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the provisions have been reduced. People will still run for employment. There will not be employment. Naturally, the social development is going to reduce. So there are a lot of announcements. And another good thing with the healthcare is 19.6% of hike in Ayush to the Ministry of Ayush. Yes, the rural India still believes in India's ancient medicine, and there is some fund allocated. What is going to be the product sale? How they are going to market the products made of Ayush? And whether it is going to be kept at the primary health centers, is it going to impact on the rural India? It still remains a question. There is a budgetary allocation. Whether it is going to reach to the general public, it remains a question mark. And there is also a good announcement of 157 nursing colleges along with the medical colleges. These nursing ASHA workers and the nursing staff, the students who learn, there can also be some sort of bond which has been created so that they'll serve for 2 years or 3 years in the rural setup, so that the health index would naturally improve. And there should also be some sort of analysis on the health index at various rural areas. So I thank for this opportunity. I would focus that implementation and the impact, what the various schemes has been producing in the rural India has to be reviewed before announcement of newer projects or renaming of any projects. Thank you for this opportunity.
Dr. Samuel, before you conclude, may I request you to conclude by suggesting one line of intervention, which area you think, because we have been working in the field with the rural people for quite some time. You have got very rich experience. Now you might be thinking at the back of your mind, there is some areas where intervention would make a very, very big difference for the rural transformation. Now, what is that intervention that you think that should be taken up and should be part of the policy perspective of any government or any political power?
Sir, I would focus on employability at rural India and health index. The health is nation's wealth, and the health policy which has been implemented at rural India should be in letter and in spirit, not just in papers. And I would clearly suggest that the employability of the people in rural, let us not give up on our traditional basis. The traditional basis of the products developed by the farmers, if it is marketed well, that will naturally impact on the income of every farmer. Marketing the products made from rural India would definitely impact on the growth index and the per capita income as well as the nation's income. Secondly, on the healthcare sector, whatever the government proposes in paper should also be implemented in spirit. That will definitely improve the longevity of people living in rural India. So the products of the farmer who has a traditional base has to be marketed, not just the millets, but also the other products like millet hubs, which they named it as Sri Anna. If they can rename it in a better way and market it at the world forums, the farmers' per capita income is going to increase. Rather suggesting,
including agricultural produces,
yes, all agriculture produces and the products made out of it. There are few.
You mean to say MSP? You mean to say MSP should be there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very much.
MSP, you see the minimum support price should be there for the agriculture producers. You mean to say?
Of course.
Some market intervention?
Yes, sir. Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you, Samuel. Very nice, and very insightful presentation that you made. Now we have the last speaker in the panel, Dr. G.V. Ramanujanalu. May I request Professor Ramanujanalu to share his thoughts in this panel discussion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks, IMPRI, for giving me this opportunity to share our views on the budget. I feel in the last 5 to 6 years, what has happened in rural India, particularly with the government had a flagship program saying doubling the farmers' income, and which never doubled. In fact, it didn't even maintain the income which was there. Given that they didn't learn lesson and then clearly came up with a plan, that's what I would say. The budget is not anyway nearer to meeting the objectives of the government. So from that point of view, I feel there was no comprehensive approach towards agriculture. That's what is the major failure, which need to be seen here. And so getting into the details, many economists have already mentioned, so I'm not going to the details. Basically, allocations have been down, and then even whatever is allocated also is not spent. And since there is no comprehensive approach, results are also not seen. 2 flagship programs which are announced newly, I would say, may have some good impact, but funds allocated are very little. One, I would say, the natural farming. So the whole crisis with chemical fertilizers and pesticides is seen as a problem, and then shift towards natural farming is announced. So in PM announced a year back actually on that India will shift towards natural farming. Substantial investments will be made to support farmers. And in this budget, they said they will have 1 crore farmers shifting towards natural farming, and budget allocated is 459 crores. 459 rupees per farmer. You can imagine what would be the shift which will happen. So I think while the intentions
per farmer, how much?
See, it's a 459 crores. They said 1 crore farmers. So it's 459 rupees. So practically it is not even 500 rupees per farmer. Probably they'll spend more.
Good
So
exercise.
yeah. No, it's not even 500 rupees, I would say. So basically it will end up as advertisements, etc. Probably it won't even cover the travels of the people. So to even attend a training, nothing will work out like that. So while the intentions are made, I think the implementations and then thinking through the process is very bad. I think that's what I would say. That mainly because you're trying to get the same people who doesn't believe in this model to design the program. So ICR, Department of Agriculture, who actually doesn't believe in this model, you're trying to ask them to design the program and implement the program. You're making them responsible, and it's not going to work. I think that's a classical example which you can see the intention. And second, I would say, second is the PM Pranam, which they again announced, which is a very interesting program. For the first time, a government program is announced to pay for the ecosystem services. So moving to, if a state reduces fertilizer use compared to the last 3 years average, if the urea use is reduced, the amount of money which is used in the last 3 years as a subsidy for supplying that urea will be paid directly to the state government, and state government in that 70% can use for the program approach, but 30% can go to directly to the farmer. This is what the scheme says. Looks interesting, but who will invest in that? Who will invest in that? Particularly when your natural farming is only 450 rupees per farmer. And how are you going to see the results? Because you are going to pay after the end of the year if you see the result. And if there is no result, you are anyway not going to pay. While the intentions are expressed, but practicality seems to be a problem in this. Otherwise, it will be a good program. Say, I was trying to make a back of envelope calculation. Say Punjab, for example, with its Punjab uses something like 2.7 million tons of nitrogenous fertilizer. So the subsidy which goes into it is nearly about 24,000 crores. 24,000 crores, Punjab. So even if Punjab reduces even 1/4 of the fertilizer, the amount which goes to the Punjab would be much higher. But what does Punjab do to reduce it? Who will invest there? I think that's the issue. So unless you invest there and then support, then it would have been much better. So that's the kind of thing. So there's a potential for the scheme, and also it will help you to meet the global commitments under the climate change mitigation. And also the fertilizer use efficiency is going down significantly. As you know, it was 13 kg per every kg of fertilizer used in 1970. Today it is just 2 kg. So whatever you are using literally is going to the drain, spoiling the environment and water, and makes no sense for any more sense for using unless you increase the soil organic matter and then nutrient balance. So that towards that there is no approach which is announced. And coming back to a couple of other things, in front of government, the major challenge is how do we increase farmers' income? I think that's a key thing. And towards that, if it has to happen, there should be an equitable distribution of resources between states also should happen. Today, that is not the case. Say, large part of the investments which government makes goes to a couple of states in the country. So other states, other crops, no support at all. So how that can be distributed, decentralized is something which is very important. Unless there is a change in the cropping patterns, rice and wheat area going substantially down, rice, wheat, cotton, unless these three goes down substantially and increasing the area in other crops happen, there's no future for agriculture, I would say. We are going to doom. Similarly, if the same amount of fertilizer, same amount of water is going to be used, we are again going to be doomed. So how you are going to invest so that the transition will happen? If you're investing only on rice and wheat, but ask the farmers to make a shift, to shift towards millet, to grow pulses, to grow towards vegetables, without actually investing there, makes really no sense. So that transition should happen. So probably procurement system can be decentralized. Let states decide what they want. Allocate the budget, like the PM Pranam, they said fertilizer subsidy will go to the states. Let the food subsidy go to the state. Let state decide what is grown locally, what they need to buy from outside. Let them make a plan whether the cropping patterns locally will shift or they can buy from neighboring states. That kind of, some radical shifts are important. So transformation at the policy level is something which is very, very critical. Doing more of the same will not help. That's my first point. Second
at
important.
At the same time, Professor Dr. Ramaju,
yeah.
fair price for the farmers produces.
I'm coming to that.
Point,
actually,
you must touch upon that. I mean, the hard living.
Yes, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that.
Yeah,
so fair price for farmers, fair price for the farmers comes from two different sources actually. One, we need to cut down the cost of cultivation significantly, which is today increasing significantly. Today, say for example, in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, the cost of paddy production is 3,000 rupees. And if you are going to continue with the kind of excessive production costs, no amount of price is going to benefit. So government should substantially invest in extension services, shifting farmers towards more low input production models. That shift is something which is important. That should come from research, that should come from extension services, which is not happening. Second is on the market side. So market side, while procurement is done only for 2-3 crops, rest of the crops are the ones which are actually facing the problem. The whole crisis in rest of the crops. So price stabilization fund has to be substantially been allocated. That is not there. So only those crops which have stability is what is supported. Rice, wheat, cotton. All other crops are the ones which are actually having the fluctuation, and no investments are being made to actually create stability over there. So that is something which is which we need to understand.
Stability due to support prices?
Not support
Stability.
prices. I would say market fluctuation. Say market fluctuation, for example.
But
if
I'm trying to, yeah, I understand, but I'm trying to know more from you on the minimum support price prescription. Now, if the minimum support price being provided to the crops, all crops, systematically.
Yeah, so minimum support price model has to change, is what I would say. So fair price is something which is important, but not the current model. See, the current model, what is happening is that, say, for example, let's take rice. There's a minimum support price. Most of the states procure. Are the paddy farmers happy about it? Paddy farmers happy about it. So extending it also will have the same problem, because yield-wise, there is a variation across crops. So we need to have a clear pricing policy. It's not just extending minimum support price to other crops. That's the point. So we need a pricing policy. We need a complete market policy in this country, but not this piecemeal approach which we are having today. Because say, if you're procuring rice and wheat, everybody is growing only rice and wheat. But all other crops which are more important for soil, more important for food security, more important, which can be locally grown, there's no support at all. So we need to have a different model for this. We should have a minimum price, fair price assured, but will it come only by government intervention or by market intervention? But whoever does it, but how will we support farmers so that that price stability can be managed is something we need to figure out. So I think actually price stabilization fund will help. And there was a announcement earlier about PM ASHA and many other things, but it didn't work well.
But price stability is a myth.
That's the point I'm trying to say. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Price stability is a myth.
See, the point I'm trying to make is, see, all interventions made by government policy to price stabilization is from a consumer point of view. It was never from a farmer's point of view. When the price falls, there is no interventions at all. We actually need interventions when the price falls, not when price goes up. So if you look at all the last 5-6 years or 10 years data on price interventions, they're all when actually the price.
In fact, the
market
price
regulation.
In fact, the allocation for price stabilization fund has gone down from 1,500 crores last year to 0.01 crore this year.
1 looks too big. It is 1 lakh rupees.
Yeah.
1 lakh rupees. 1 lakh rupees is one farmer's harvest. One farmer's harvest a season. One small marginal farmer's harvest. Just to give a comparison, it is just one small marginal farmer in this country produces 1 lakh worth products. So what are you going to intervene? That's the point I'm trying to make. So you're talking about something, but no interventions have been made towards that. So we need to do that. Another important issue, PM Kisan, very good. We have gone beyond price and input use and then gone into direct income support measures. But 6,000 rupees, whose need is this going to meet? So there should be a policy on the income support. It should be based on certain criteria. It cannot be just a will and wish, say it is 6,000 rupees today, tomorrow it is 6,500. It should be like a salary structure where it is linked to inflation, where it is linked to the different indicators based on which actually it should be given. So the way it should operate is, we should actually have a kind of commission which looks into farmers' income, which looks at various interventions, whether prices are contributing for farmers' income, whether subsidies are contributing to the farmers' income, how living costs are generated. If all of these are not meeting the needs, that would be the income which need to be supported. So it is not 6,000 rupees. It is not 6,000 rupees. You need to bring together incomes, expenditures at the farm level and at the government level, balance it. The balance which farmers cannot do, government should give. I think that's where actually the PM Kisan should head. Second, another important thing, currently it is defined farmer as the one who has land. There's substantial number of people who doesn't have land, and tenant farmers. Tenancy is increasing. And if the tenant farmer is not accessible to this one, it is of no use. So I think we need to also look at how that can be done. And lastly,
you've got only 2 minutes.
Last point. A lot of talked about FPOs. For example, investments is made. I think it's a good approach to have farmer collectives, cooperatives, etc. But end up paying a lot of GST. So you brought everybody together and then say you can do the business, but you end up GST. Usually you don't have GST. The moment you come together, you have a GST. And you say do value addition, you will get benefit. But on many products, if you are paying 5% as a GST, what is the benefit farmer is going to have? So tax exemptions, when IT industry is given so much tax stops for a long period, why not we also exempt GST for farmers, FPOs? Have at least for 5 years, have slabs, and say someone who is doing less than 2 crore business, probably they can be exempted from GST. That kind of changes, I think, is something which is very important. Similarly, on the loans, accessing loans is still a problem. Farmers accessing credit, again, very low. Cooperatives, collectives, FPOs accessing loans also is a problem. So we need to have new loan modules. Last point, I'm closing here. PM Fasal Bima Yojana. See, this insurance is, I see it's, see, in India, we don't have a crop insurance, to be frank. It is a loan insurance. PMFBY is a loan insurance because whoever does take the bank loan is what will get coverage. So many times the definition of the insurance and then the area makes it inaccessible. So the area should come down. When the risk is increasing, the unit area has to come down to village, if not to the farmer level. And today you have a lot of IT structures came up. You can actually assess very easily. Why should you take so much time? So we should have a complete revision of insurance module in the country. But insurance can only work if you reduce the risk in agriculture. Reduce the risk, residual risk can be covered under insurance. And without making any effort for reducing risk in agriculture, just expecting that it will be covered under insurance is not going to happen. And that's what we are seeing in the last several years. And many states moving out of Fasal Bima Yojana is because of that. Because the premium increases, the risk increases, premium increases, and then it's only the insurance companies which are going to get benefit, not the farmers. So that is something which is very important. So I stop here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. I must say, I mean, I don't know how to really thank all of you to have made very short, within the very short span of time, able to make very substantive points, with a critical evaluation of the budget and its relevance to the rural realities of India. Several questions could be there at any level, and that is what, even when I speak at the several questions could be there at another level, but that is always there. That is how it goes on. The beauty of this particular forum, which is being initiated by this IMPRI, which I've been observing for the last few years or so, is that it draws scholars from all schools of thought, generate a momentum of debate, discussions, and all that, thrash out the issues, and what are the best part of the whole thing is being what is called, is being drawn from all the discussions, and they are also bringing out volumes and sharing with a large number of people. So it's a great opportunity for every one of us to be a part of this process and also articulate our points of view, our thinking, our theoretical construction, and possibly we'll be able to, at some stage or the other, to create a new thinking, new process of thinking banking and all that. That is something which is scarce today and which is really important for us to really deal with. Now, may I now open the entire discussion for questions and answers. If anybody is there to raise any question, he or she is most welcome to question anybody of the panels. Now, I am opening it up now. Yes. Is there anybody who can raise certain questions? Any question, any clarification? Somebody is speaking. Somebody wants to.
Fiza, go ahead. Fiza?
Yes, sir.
Fiza.
Yes, sir. So my question is, like this year in the budget, the allocation to the rural sector has already reduced compared to last year. So with the aim of 5 trillion economy that the government has already proposed, I mean, how do you see that it can be achieved, or whether it is a feasible goal as the government has set?
You are asking whom? This question to directed to whom?
Sir, I'll prefer Professor Sekhar. Sir,
Oh, Sekhar.
to answer the
Professor Sekhar, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think the government as of now doesn't seem to be really they're not serious about the 5 trillion economy or doubling farmers' income, because doubling farmers' income, the date is already gone. So for various reasons, I mean, they may cite COVID, but even otherwise, even if COVID had happened, they would not have probably reached there. So I don't think they have that in mind. And as for your larger question about rural sector receiving lesser allocations this year, yes, I think last year it was better, because although the overall allocation to the agriculture sector and rural sector was not very high last year also, but they focused on subsectors of agriculture, and in fact we discussed last year, which were growth enhancing and which were likely to give income to the farmers. But this year that doesn't seem to have happened. I think one very important point that Dr. Jyotsna Jha made, which is extremely important, that's why I was continuously highlighting the difference between revised estimates and budgeted estimates. In fact, she made this point that one, you do not implement a program well and then you make that program look as though it's a failed one. And once you dub it as a failed one, then you close down that program. This has been happening not only with this government, but other governments, earlier governments also. So here I am worried about that aspect of Ministry of Agriculture's programs. So many of them show this revised allocations going down, and then over a period of time, for example, PM ASHA is getting 0.01 crore, and price stabilization fund, as Dr. Ramanjanil Garu has very rightly pointed out, it's an extremely important scheme to stabilize prices in the market for non-MSP commodities. But unfortunately, its allocation has gone down from 1,500 crores to 0.01 crore in single year. I mean, this is not the way it should. So now it appears as though these are going to be failed programs, and then next year probably they will be phased out. In fact, if I don't know, there is one mention in the budget speech of the finance minister, which says result-based financing. Let me quote that exactly. To better allocate scarce resources for competing development needs, the financing of select schemes will be changed from input-based to result-based. This is what she has said. Now what this means is that if your results don't look good, your financing will cease over a period of time. So some of these programs like Price Stabilization Fund, PM ASHA, and many, I see 2 or 3 such programs which have got into this state of failed programs place, and next year probably they will be. So I honestly do not know what is going to happen in the next budget, but I can only hope, because if you remember, PM Kisan was launched in the interim budget of 2019, just before the elections. So a similar thing might happen in 2024. We might see some really good initiatives coming up in the next year. That's my hope. That's wishful thinking, perhaps.
Yeah, can I add a point here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Dr. Sekhar, that it's not only that input-based and result-based, in this whole framework, what the result is, that also remains unknown. You can pick
Yeah.
and choose what you define as result. That makes it even more unpredictable and yeah.
Dr. Jyotsna, you're not supposed to know. That is what the government say.
Actually, continuing to what sir has said and what ma'am has also mentioned in her discussion, that if the policy or if the program doesn't show result, then it will be considered as a failed policy or program. So they will stop allocating money for that program. So doesn't that bring the government into a bad light, that the policies or programs that they are bringing in are not turning out well? So, I mean, if taking it from the political viewpoint, so doesn't that bring the government in a bad light and hampers their vote bank or something of that sort? So why would a government want that their program doesn't work out or it just get failed and they stop funding it?
It's a really interesting question again, because this all brings it into the political economy, realm of political economy. Why would a government want to show some programs as failed? Because it may backfire on them. And right now it seems the thinking is that agriculture, whatever the government does or doesn't do, whether it's COVID or not, agriculture has been on a trajectory of its own, 3%, 3.6%, and those kinds of things. So probably one way to tackle this problem is to show that agriculture is doing well. So it's a proof of our programs actually working. Some programs may be failing, but overall our agriculture policy is working. That may be the strategy politically, I don't know. Because actually now if you see the farmers agitation last year for nearly a year, and they were demanding this higher MSP for all the crops, legalizing MSP and all that stuff. And the government has constituted a committee. You may be aware of that. But that committee's terms of reference, if you see, if some of you may have seen those terms of reference, the terms of reference have some very unrelated aspects like drip irrigation, natural farming. Okay, when we're talking about MSP to farm crops, how can MSP, natural farming come in? Natural farming can come in from the cost side. I can understand if you want to reduce the cost and if you want to increase the income of the farmer, that can be. But if you're talking about MSP, then that cannot be there. So there are many such things. So the whole thing seems to be, the thinking doesn't seem to be very coherent right now. I mean, let me be very clear on that. The thinking doesn't seem to be very good. And can I just clarify one point to Dr. Ramanjanil Garu? Actually, he said that PM Kisan, that rupees 6,000 is not adequate. Actually, I fully agree with that. So 6,000 is not adequate, and it's not based on any scientific or rational basis. So what we did is we have taken the cost of cultivation of 5 cereals, 5 pulses and 4 oilseeds across the country for which MSPs are announced, and taking the production patterns all over the country, state by cost of production data from all the states, and so finally we have arrived at a figure. In fact, that paper is published in EPW. If you want, I can say.
Yes, it will be very useful.
Price or income support to farmers, that's the title of that paper. So where we have done detailed calculations, and what we find is that a minimum of, based on cost of production of various crops in various states, a minimum of around 19,000 rupees is needed. 6,000 is just not adequate. Okay. And there we again say that, okay, if the central government cannot bear the entire burden, okay, it can go for half of that and let states top up the remaining amount or whatever amount they want to do, so that states also can pitch in. So that's the argument we give, and then that has come out in EPW into one in March and another in August. I can share that paper. So just for your information, that our calculations, very detailed calculations, show that.
So just can I ask one question on this?
Yeah, sure.
So if say states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, Chhattisgarh are actually topping up.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
did you see any change, any benefit or any difference on this?
Difference in what terms?
No, in terms of farmers' livelihoods. Say if you are talking about, say, if the topping up will help. So states where topping up is happening, do you see any difference?
We have not looked at the impact of already topping. What we did is, actually this was done when the farmers were raising this demand. Then we said, okay, what if this MSP is legalized, or if MSP is ensured for each and every farmer? Then what will be your expenditure? Suppose instead of legalizing MSP, you just take the cost of production, because that's the base. That's the thing that the farmer incurs. So if we only take the cost of production and just give him that money directly as a direct income transfer, then what will it come to? So there we found that around 19,000 will be the income that is needed per farm. Okay. On this legalizing MSP thing, we find the expenditure is huge, almost like 3,40,000 crores for these 14 crops, only 14 crops. Not sugarcane we have not included, cotton we have not included, but because their system is completely different. So only for these cereals, pulses and 4 oil seeds, 5 cereals, 5 pulses and 4 oil seeds, we get 3,40,000 per annum. So that's the kind of. So if you legalize MSP, but if you go for a direct income transfer, it will be much less. But even then, you will need at least 19,000 rupees per farm.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll connect you.
Anybody else is there?
And just one point about the PMFBY that you made, Ramanjanair garu. Actually, right now the non-loany farmers are also eligible for PMFBY.
No, they're eligible, but nobody takes it because there is no use of it. That's the point I'm trying.
No, there is a lot of uptake from last year. So if you see the data, at least government figures show that there are a number of non-loany farmers who are availing PMFBY. So there is some improvement there.
Actually, this point is related to somebody who was, I think Thomas was, Samuel. Dr. Samuel was making in a broad spectrum. Like whatever products are being produced by the rural people, maybe the artisan products, maybe agricultural commodities, whatever, that comes from rural areas to the urban areas and the rest of the country, and also abroad, export also takes place. Now, question is that how do you increase, or how do you think that these people will get more from what they're selling? If the terms of trade, what they're getting from the industrial sector, one part, that's the debate that long ago that took place that you must be knowing about, the terms of trade debate. I'm not getting into that. But if what they're getting and what they're selling, they should get more, so that income transferred on its own will take place, and that will certainly alleviate the problems of poverty and misery, or whatever it may be that you think about underdevelopment. Rather, I would say that immediately, there could be many other things, but one of the ways of what Thomas was speaking about, that artisan products or any agricultural producers that you have now, whether you go by the MSP or go for any other thing, the point is that you have to see the rural producers, whether it's an artisan, or small landowner, or whatever, they get right prices for their producers. That could be instrumental for them to generate the higher level of living. Is it not the argument proper, Dr. Sekhar?
You're muted.
Yeah. Could you just repeat the last point? I missed it.
I'm saying that, you see, whether you have an MSP or anything else, the point is that the right price, the price which they are getting, many cases, agriculture price, for example, many cases the lower than, in fact, they're at loss, many cases. And that is one thing which has a ramification on the standard of living a majority of the people in the rural areas, whether the agricultural wage laborer or the small, everybody, the whole chain gets disrupted. Now, if the income rises of the products that they're producing, whether they're artisan or agriculture farmers, whatever it may be, the price of the product they produce, that should be more than what they're getting. Now, how to increase the price of so the income of these people will work naturally. Naturally, not that you have to give some dole and increase. Like, for example, who I think Jyotsna Jha was speaking or somebody, like giving a marketing outlet, providing a marketing outlet. And in Rajasthan, I know that I did a study, marketing outlet is to be given for the weavers. And they used to sell their produce, long ago I'm talking about, produce at a very, very good price and all that. Now, middleman system used to be eliminated in the process. So I am saying the marketing outlet is one of the ways to do it within the given system. I'm not talking about changing the system. Given system, there could be renovation. Now, I am saying that there could be several measures of that kind that could be taken up. And 60% of the population of the country, or more than 60% of the people who live in the rural areas, we always talk about the rural, India lives in rural areas. When it comes to the share of the rural areas, the total pie, it is completely miserable. Now, the question that to ask every one of us, how to really change it? This is one of the routes I could see that it can be done by enhancing the income of these rural people by increasing the price of the producers they produce. Am I right or wrong, Dr. Sekhar?
Yeah, it is a very complex question, but let me try and answer to the best of my ability. See, I will confine to agriculture. Okay. In agriculture, we have certain products which have MSP. Say paddy in say Telangana or Andhra or Punjab. So this is a crop for which MSP is announced, and the government also makes a procurement. So somebody is there to buy at that price, whatever price is announced. So the farmer gets his income. Now, imagine some other, say, nutri cereal or coarse cereal, some coarse cereal, which doesn't, for which MSP is announced, but there is no purchase by the government. So the farmer will not realize his income. He will not get the income. So for MSP to be giving income to a farmer, there are two conditions that need to be. First, the farmer has to produce that whatever he has to produce something, and then he should be able to sell at that price. Only when those two conditions are satisfied, he will get his income. But then, if we are talking about incomes, why do we want to use price as the instrument, MSP or anything? That's my fundamental question. Because price is a resource allocation instrument. When there is some price, I suppose the price of say X product is high. What I do is I devote more resources to producing X. So that way I try to get the income. So my resource allocation policy is guided by price. But if you are really bothered about only income, suppose for example, you have say some kodu or some kind of a product for which you announce an MSP, and you also procure that. So all the farmers produce, seeing the MSP, a lot of kodu. And then as government, as an FCI guy, I go and procure that. Where will I sell it if there is no demand? So unfortunately, this supply demand, only when they are in equilibrium, the price.
Yeah.
So if your idea is to give income to the farmer, where there is no supply demand, there is a problem in supply and demand thing, don't use price, give him directly income.
I agree with you. Otherwise, the supply demand thing has to be kept in mind.
Otherwise, he will supply something which you are not able to sell. So that will leave you, you mean the government, bankrupt. Okay. So it's you have to understand where there is, for example, production is needed for cereals, wheat, rice, pulses, oil seeds. Okay, these are things for which we cannot depend on international market. There's enough evidence that international markets is not perfectly competitive, it's not infinitely elastic. So these we have to produce. Because production has to be there, you give MSP and you also procure that. And you also have a public distribution system, so there is enough demand there, so you can actually have supply demand thing. But apart from these crops, other crops, there are various other crops for which there is no demand in the economy. You can't export also some of those. In those cases, target direct income transfer based on the cost, because ultimately the fellow has to survive, directly based on the cost.
Yes.
Go for direct transfers. In fact, this is what we actually wrote in that paper, that you have to sort of, you have your objectives, like you want production, you also want distribution, public distribution, then you go for MSP procurement. If you have only, your idea is only production, but there's no public distribution thing, then fine. I mean, you can go for deficiency payment system, which is there. Otherwise, if you don't have the demand in the market or in the export market, either in the domestic market or export market, go for direct income transfer. But they need to be supported, because agriculture is inherently risky, not because they are inefficient, but agriculture is inherently risky, so you need to support that fellow. So that's the idea. So this is my...
Thank you so much, Dr. Sekhar. It's a very interesting debate. I think it requires a larger discussion, debates and all that, but definitely, as you said, you made your points very clear and very convincing at the moment, as I could see, that this selectivity, the criteria of selectivity of the crops, and then giving a kind of a support is something which is very important, keeping demand and supply syndrome at the back of mind. You know, something that is the determining factor in a market economy that you cannot avoid other ways also. So therefore, that is something which, broadly speaking, the one has to be going, one has to go by the criteria of selectivity. But this is something which is, I'm telling, without much of detailed discussion. I mean, perhaps it requires more discussion and debate, but certainly very interesting point that you're making. Anybody else has any question?
I have just one question for Dr. Ramanjali Garu. So yes, you mentioned that the natural farming has got 469 crore allocation.
459.
Right?
459.
So was it there in the documents? Because I searched a lot.
It is in the document, and then they also mentioned 1 crore is the target.
I see.
They said 3 years.
All that I've seen, but budget allocation somehow I missed.
459 crores. It's a 459.
So do they have any special allocation per PM Pranam also?
No, PM Pranam, there is no allocation. It is based on reduction in the fertilizer subsidy.
Yeah, but they don't have any allocation, but they are not giving any incentive for that kind of ecosystem.
No, this is the only incentive. That's the point I was making. So 459 rupees per farmer is what their incentive. See, this came from the zero budget mindset. Right. So there is no budget. It's basically zero budget.
Okay.
So anybody else?
So I have one question for Dr. Jha.
Fija, you have a question to whom?
Professor Jha, Dr. Jha.
Oh, good that you are not questioning me. I'm very happy. Okay. To Professor Krishna Raj, you're asking a question.
Dr. Jyotsna Jha.
Dr. Jyotsna Jha.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Ma'am, you mentioned about the feminization of agriculture while you were presenting, and that the SHG's push in the budget. And given the decline in the women participation in the labor market, what are your views about the impact and possible key interventions that are required with respect to this budget? And ma'am, along with that, I would request you to please explain the term feminization of agriculture and what do you mean by that?
Yeah, feminization of not only agriculture, I was actually referring to feminization of low-paid jobs in rural as well as urban sector. I mean, look at garments, so there is a feminization that you see. And of course, even in the formal, like say, ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers are major examples of feminization of low paid jobs, that women work at, and there is predominantly, I mean, Asha and Anganwadi are entirely women, or say if you look at garment workers, they're also predominantly women, and therefore their wages remain low, and there is basically no movement. You are stagnant there. That's what feminization is. And across the world that has happened. It's not only India, it's much more prevalent in South Asia than other regions. And, coming to this declining workforce participation of women, that's a puzzle that many have been trying to solve, because it's also something that's contrary to all our neighbors, that the pattern is, even our neighbors don't have that. Forget about the Western world and other world. And therefore, it's intriguing, not fully explained, other than the fact that basically there's none of our policies perhaps are encouraging that, apart from the fact that, for example, you look at agriculture, it hardly recognizes women farmers. Forget about, low participation. It's not that many of them, I mean, as absurd as I was helping my daughter who goes to school, and there was an essay that was about rural life, that all men go to work in the field and all women sit at home. This was the sentence, actually. So, they don't sit at home. They work at home, and they also work in the field, actually. So, and hardly, if you look at even the farmers' income support and all, you will find that it has been a major struggle for women to be recognized as farmers. So forget about other things, forget about workforce participation. So I don't have actually a solution for that. I really don't have solution, because this is something I feel that, and there have been various studies. Many people say it's because of higher participation in education, but then large scale sample survey based studies have refuted that, because that's not true. It's not explained by their participation in education. It's not explained by even the marriage statistics. Marriage to an extent, yes, not fully, but yes, marriage does explain it. And then post-marriage immediately not working, it's very common. I think the only two explanations I have, and I don't have a solution, unless this is much more about social norms. It's much more about the dominant views, much more than economic, I feel. It's not only an economic challenge. One is this, that I think perhaps it's not as bad as it shows. It's also about not counting them. So when they are not counted, like women farmers, for that example, women work not being, so a lot of that being not necessarily in the realm of counting, especially in terms of when they work in their own on their own land, the marginal farmers or small farmers. So they are not even counted as farmers. So that's one thing. Other than that, I actually see as because of the feminization, because of the fact that wages and salaries are so low, wages are so low, that and the social norms, that they are not really going to the market. And when, across the world, when what happens, that when your employment is in not growing, then the first to leave the job markets are always women. That's true for even the Western world, that they will be the first to leave the job market. They will be pushed to leave the job market, and much more so in societies which are far more patriarchal. So that is one explanation that explains it to a bit. But I don't actually, I don't think any of these explain it fully and comprehensively. We need to understand it better. That's how I put it.
So, ma'am, even if the government generates a program or just allocates money for the upliftment of women or rural women, for that matter, so if it is actually backed up by social stigmas or the patriarchal society, then it is basically it is about creating awareness. And I mean, government just with allocating money cannot solve the problem as such.
Only by allocating money it cannot, but it can give messages. As I was saying, messages not okay. Sorry, I gave a lecture this morning on budget here in Bangalore somewhere, and there I was saying that messages matter, and message of this government has not been about women's empowerment. I mean, you look at any policy, it actually the messages have been quite regressive about women, women's workforce participation. So it's not about that. I was in a conference of women's studies. Actually, I had gone there as a speaker. I don't teach in women's studies, and we had a chief guest there who was actually talking who was saying that women. He spoke just before me, and he was saying that women should not be working till their children are in adolescent age. So the kind of messages that we are giving on all fronts in terms of obedience, in terms of what we mean by gender, has been very regressive. The kind of programs that have been closed down, such as, say, Mahila Samakhya. So we use the word empowerment, but the word empowerment doesn't really mean empowerment. It means something very different. So I think on gender front, we have been quite regressive in past 10 years, and that message goes down. So in our programmings also have been extremely, I would say, not supportive of. We had a very, very radical program called Mahila Samakhya, which was closed down, and very, very sudden closure happened without any notice. It just closed down. And NRLM is no substitute. There is some element there. Again, you know, the words are there, but they're empty words. If you look at the program, it teaches you something else. So you may be using the word. I mean, this budget also has all kinds of words. And if you look at numbers, they don't back them up. So similarly, and that does translate. You know, it's not that it does not translate itself. In many ways it translates. State governments take the cue, panchayats take the cue. So all that, you know, happens. It's messages matter in a democracy, in a democratic economy.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Anybody else? Naina Agarwal? No. Okay. So now,
Sir, you are concluding remarks?
Shall I conclude now?
Yes, please, sir.
Okay. I don't know how to conclude, but let me try my level best. You see, this it has been its compliment. It has been a very serious discussion. Perhaps had there been time for with all of us, and perhaps would have been all the panelists are capable of producing more thoughts. I mean, sharing their more thoughts with the people, with all of us, and enlighten us. But whatever is done is extraordinarily nice, especially as I could see myself, you know, an opportunity for me to learn from every one of you. That's something which I must say, you know, underlined also their contributions. Now, let me put forward some points before you for your consideration as a concluding remarks. You know, I have been, like many of you, attending this kind of a meeting for several years. Sometimes I deny, sometimes I participate, sometimes I chair and all that. But one trend that I could see, maybe that you will agree with me or disagree, trend is that we are always been pushed to the area of evaluating what is right, what is wrong, whether the allotment is good or bad, that kind of evaluative kind of thing, and end up there. And we are not allowed to get out of this kind of a network. It's a kind of a trap, I would say that. We intellectuals, academicians, we forget that there could be another world somewhere beyond this kind of evaluation, to see that something more concrete, more important, more relevant to the people of India who have been suffering like hell even after 75 years of independence. latest estimate that I could see, around 65 to 70% of the people in India are vulnerable. And not only one, that 2-3 organizations made this kind of observations. Look at the index, hunger index, look at all HDI index and all that. Where do you stand? What is that you're talking about? Why don't you come out from this kind of evaluation pushing their language? You have to speak in their language, you have to, the terminology that they discover, you have to react on that, and you get into that business so much so that you are unable to create your own intellectual world. This is the challenge to the academicians of a country like India. I was evaluating some projects few days ago, few months ago. Horrible. It is something like that. And I think you might be having the same experience, academicians of your stature might be having the same experience of this kind. Now, the question before us that, can we think of something very different? Is it possible? Because we do unconsciously, we are being sold out. We are being drawn into that kind of thing, unable to discover the potentials every one of us have got, to discover an area and a world with creativity. No, we are not able to do it. We get into the world of reproduction. Reproduce this one, but don't create a new knowledge base. That is what exactly we got stuck up with. Like, for example, you have got unemployment. Tell me, who has not heard? Is that increasing at a frightening scale? Everybody knows. I also quoted many people. I have recently also did some work on the frightening scale. Everybody knows. Now, ask an economics soul scientist, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. How to really counter this kind of a negative trend of society. Because employment is the trickle down to the market economy that ensures the livelihood, sustainability, and so on and so forth. Rest of the things are barbars. Give employment, then talk. No, that is the third there. And the frightening scale is increasing. And we got into something else. And not only that, it is a very serious problem that you are not able to. Harari, and a historian, I think you must have heard about Harari, is a very famous historian. His last book I read just a few, 1 or 2 months ago. It's one of the most interesting books that I read. It is the 21st questions of the 21st century. What he said? He said that now, very soon, we are going to face a serious problem. We miss all over the world. And more so, its pressure will come under pressure on the developing countries, underdeveloped country like India. Bioengineering and biotechnology. And in the budget, it is written artificial intelligence. It's the bioengineering part of that, bioengineering. These are the two things where intervention, whether the private corporate sector is going to really enhance their aggression through this process. These two, biotechnology and bioengineering. And now, that's okay. Now, what is this implications? Implication is that employment. As such, you have the labor market of a different kind today, structured today altogether. Now, tomorrow, after a few days or few years or so, you may come across a situation where the different type of skill is required. Skilled people are required. Now, the abundance of the skilled people will be there, and there is again, it will add to the problems of unemployment. There could be employment even for that also. But then what kind of employment? What are the type of people going to be employed? Harari explains that one. And then is a crisis of a different kind altogether. Now, what I'm trying to say that today you may not see it's in a gigantic form, maybe a little bit here and there, but tomorrow day is going to really, as so, computer was not introduced before the introduction of the computer. What kind of situation are they with a computer? But it is a different situation. It's not the computer like, it's the artificial intelligence which is going to intervene all aspects of life. And therefore, it needs a different skill and it more the so and so forth, and already it budgeted, some sort of intervention is going to take place. It's good. But now my question is that, what is going to happen to the employment market, job market, to the large number? As such, you have a big problem. Then what's going to happen? In other words, we need to think very seriously as to what's going to happen for our next generation people. That is very important for us to really think about. Now, we have still, especially the economists. I'm an economist, but then certainly I'm critical of myself. I do with this kind of economics, which only talks about growth, growth, and growth. is a panacea. Now, the question immediately, do we ask this question, which, you know, what is his name? You know, this that the limits to growth, that person who written the limits to growth, she wrote, what is her name? This, I wrote somewhere, her name is, anyway, write that growth for whom? For what? At what cost? What are the economics that are doing with that? Growth for whom? Have the economics asked this question? For what? At what cost? Environmental cost, human cost, natural resource cost, and then what is the long-term effect to the economy? I did a work on what's called agriculture and how the value addition, how much value has been taken away because of the environmental cost. Look at Ecuador, a huge study they did, and that industry, that country developed over a period of time by extracting the natural resources, exporting them to the outside country, and therefore the entire terms of trade went against them in the real terms. So they are suffering now. There are many studies of this kind all over. In other words, cost, not only natural cost. Now, who are the people being victim of this cost, being displaced? So in other words, we need to see growth. Yes, we want growth. Tell me who doesn't growth if the growth is what's called distribute the fruits of growth are there for everybody, every individual, resolve the crisis, unemployment crisis, resolve the food crisis. These are the questions that we need to ask. We are not asking such questions. Only thing that 7.5%, 2%, same is the question the Manmohan Singh time, same question was there, 10%, 11%, 12%. It went on. And then you have a jobless growth. And today also we are facing the similar situation, much worse than that. And we are going to multiply this one. Tell me, what is the answer to that? We do not know. And then, this is the third question is then the budget should really reflect on those kinds of what's called serious problem that you are facing now today. And tomorrow we are going to, budget is not a one time, it's a kind of, as you know, it reflects a policy perspective of the government in power. The policy perspective, the policy direction, what they're going to do, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow also. It is something like the chain of events that are going to take place. And if that is not being taken care of, it will push to only the counting, this much of money is going to be given, should be more, should be less, correct, no dispute about it. But then you have to go one step forward to see what is that they're trying to talk about and what is the implication of it and how really to resolve the crisis of the rural areas, especially where we feel proud of saying that India lives in rural areas. But when it comes to the question of share of the rural areas, you find that they're deprived a lot. And this is not the story of 1 year, the story of 75 years of independence. Tell me, where do I stand? Now, the question is that one of the solutions that is talked about, just let me tell you, come down on the whole question of this. Jyotsna Jha was talking about a very interesting point. And I think Sekhar also was mentioning about another people, like integrating farm, non-farm sector. Now, this is a very interesting thing. This is in the 80s and 90s. I did a number of works on this kind of farm, non-farm integrations and all that. And some of you have been doing this kind of work and all that. But something, it is within the typical neoclassical framework, the market economy framework. Now go down to that. There's nothing wrong with that. But then point is that here, I do talk about when structural transformation. I just want to hit, I have argued in various papers, and one paper is coming out in Routledge. Now, niche construction structure, construction of niche structure. Now, when I talk about structural transformation of the rural areas, you emphasize on what is called construction of niche structure. This is the expression that I have coined, and I have produced a few papers on that. In case you are interested, I will share with you in some other forum now how really this can resolve the crisis of unemployment in rural areas. And this is something with the government, when it's with Patna, Sinha, I gave to the government of Bihar. I don't know what they're going to do. But now, this is something, constructive niche structure is very much necessary there to work out something that I have done with it. And last point, but not least, it is again, some of you have talked about, is the integration of both. Economists must learn about it. And there are, Institute of New Economic Thinking, there's an institute which I'm a part of. And there are many other people who have been thinking all over the world. Now, economics cannot be economistic in their outlook. They need to integrate both economic and non-economic factors, social factors, and to see that how economic progress can take place. It cannot be what's called separate. It is two sides of the same coin. This is what economics should learn. It is not that you're precisely talking about how much money you're putting, but the question, what is its ramification on the social side also? You have a society which is left with huge social discrimination. Can you deny it? In a society which is discriminated against each other, if you really do an economic intervention, do you think the fruits of the benefit will go to the people who are at the lower rank? No. Whether it is a scheduled caste or a Muslim or a deprived community, no. Majority of it going to the richer section or the upper section. Let's put this back straight. And if this is the case, what kind of development that you're talking about? In other words, what I'm trying to say, it is necessary for us to integrate both economic and non-economic parameters and get out of what is called modeling of that kind, model of a different kind. Perhaps it will be successful. Let us make us more Indian. Let us see that a country like India makes its own footstep, and it's possible not to what's called imitate the rest of the world, imitate the capitalist developed countries of the world, imitate us, try to see how resources could be utilized by us, how budget can be provided, like the decentralized sector in Kerala. Doing marvelous work. Okay, there are limitations also, definitely. But definitely there are good works that has been done, not only in many other places, maybe doing similar type of work. Learn the lessons from their economists, and therefore planning could be there. There could be a different budget altogether. Thank you so much. Sorry that I've taken so much of time, but it's an opportunity for me to share. In case you find anything wrong, you please always tell me and also give me feedback so that I can also proceed on my own to think something on my own. But only thing that I leave it to you to decide, can we have a place of our own? Can we think something? Can we really work with our own potentials? And if you want to talk about model, develop a model of your own. Why don't you have a different parameters and assumptions? Do it. And if you go by the derivative of neoclassical economics, but you are caught in the same trap, you are not able to come out. And that is what exactly my experience is all about. Now, the world is changing, that economics world also have been changing. Mind it, we have to really get out of it. Mind it, people are rising, and that which is necessary for us to really meet the aspirations of the people who are down to report generations and generations. It is this that we have the responsibility that we've taken for the 21st century. Budget is something which really gives you a kind of a lever, but that is not the parts of it. It goes on and on. There are other budget will be there. That's all the thing, but it gives a huge amount of training to us as to how to go about. Thank you so much for all that you spent so quite a bit of time and for your great contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So as we have come to the end of today's discussion, I, Fiza Mahajan, researcher, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, for today's deliberation, a panel discussion on rural realities and Union Budget 2023-24. We are grateful to our chair, Professor Sunil Ray, and panelists, Professor C.S.C. Sekhar, Dr. Jyotsna Jha, Professor Krishna Raj, Dr. Samuel Thomas, and Dr. G.V. Ramanjanelu, for taking part in enlightening us. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. You may also find more discussion on rural issues in our IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, The State of Villages, #Rural Realities, and other thematic series. We are grateful if you are watching us later on our YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We also invite you to IMPRI's third annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of Union Budget, financial year 2023-24, being organized from February 2nd to 7th, 2023. Wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.